All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to jump right into a debate that, well, it really shakes up everything we thought we knew about biology. We're talking about a huge challenge to the fundamental story of life itself.
And it all kicks off with this quote right here from Denis Noble, a physiologist at Oxford. He says, "Neo-Darwinism is dead." I mean, that is a huge claim, right? To just declare a cornerstone of modern biology dead? That's not something you say lightly.
So what's going on here? To really get why he'd say something so provocative, we first have to ask, what even is Neo-Darwinism? And then we'll dig into the evidence that Noble says has completely torn it apart.
Okay, so first things first, we need to understand the theory that's in the hot seat. You see, for the last, 70, 80 years or so, biology has been totally dominated by this one powerful story, and it's all about the gene.
And right at the heart of this story is something called the central dogma. This was Francis Crick's big idea. Think of it like a one-way street for information. The instructions flow out from the DNA to the rest of the cell, but information can never, ever flow back to the DNA. It's a one-way trip.
And this really breaks it down, right? The DNA is the master blueprint, the ultimate boss. It tells the proteins, kind of like the construction workers of the cell, what to do. And those workers just follow the instructions to build the final product, the organism. You, me, a tree, whatever. In this picture, the organism itself gets zero say. It's just the end result.
Now, you've probably heard of this idea, maybe without even realizing it. It exploded into popular culture with Richard Dawkins' famous book, The Selfish Gene. And the core idea is pretty wild, that we, you, me, every living thing, we're basically just fancy cars or survival machines that our genes built for one reason and one reason only, to make more copies of themselves.
Okay, so that's the established story. But here's where Denis Noble comes in and says, hold on a second. He argues that this neat top-down story, it just doesn't work anymore. He says the core ideas, the very foundation of it, have totally crumbled because of what we've discovered.
So Noble basically lays out a case with 4 major points. He says, look, first, DNA isn't the perfect self-replicator we thought it was. Second, that supposed wall that protects our genes from the rest of the body, it's not really a wall. Third, organisms can actually mess with their own DNA. And fourth, the latest data from molecular biology, it just doesn't back up this gene-first story anymore.
All right, let's just focus on that first point for a second, because this one is a real doozy. The whole idea that DNA is this perfect little machine that just copies itself flawlessly, almost like a crystal growing, yeah, Noble says that's a complete myth.
Get this, if we just let DNA copy itself based on its own raw chemical accuracy, every single time one of your cells divides, you'd get around 300,000 errors. 300,000. A cell with that many screw-ups would be toast. It just couldn't function.
So what does that mean? It means the living cell doesn't just stand back and watch the DNA do its thing. No way, it's an active manager. There's this whole crew of proteins, think of them as tiny little editors and proofreaders that are constantly scanning the DNA, finding mistakes, and fixing them. So it's not the DNA ensuring a perfect copy, it's the cell, the entire living system, that makes sure the job gets done right.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem. It has huge real-world consequences. Remember the Human Genome Project? The promise was massive. They said, hey, once we map all the genes, we'll be able to cure cancer in 10 years. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, a huge study just last year found that for most common diseases, the connection to our genes is actually pretty weak. So the blueprint just isn't the all-powerful predictive map we were sold.
Okay, so if that one-way street is actually a dead end, then where do we go? What's the alternative? Well, Noble puts forward a completely different model. He calls it biological relativity, and it's a whole new way of looking at how life actually works. So forget that top-down boss and worker thing. This is all about a two-way street. Of course, genes influence the organism. Nobody's denying that. But, and this is the crucial part, the organism, the whole living system, also influences the genes. It affects how they're used, how they're read, even how they get changed. There's no single master controller. It's a conversation, not a command.
Now, a core piece of this is a fancy-sounding idea called harnessing stochasticity. But all that really means is this. Living things aren't just passive victims of random chance and random mutations. Instead, they can actually use randomness to their advantage to solve problems and get things done in a very specific, purposeful way.
And the best example of this is your own immune system. Just think about it. When a virus gets in you, your body doesn't just sit around hoping for some lucky random mutation to save the day.
Nope. It goes into overdrive, generating millions of totally random antibodies. Then it tests them all out, finds the few that actually work against the virus, and mass produces only those ones. It's literally doing natural selection inside your body, on the fly. It's not blind. It's incredibly directed.
And what's really fascinating is that this idea of organisms having some kind of agency, it's not actually new. Noble points out that Darwin himself, way after he wrote On the Origin of Species, was already thinking this way. He talked about the peacock's crazy tail feathers not just as some genetic accident, but as the result of a conscious, intentional choice to wow the peahens.
Okay, so we're getting deep into the biology here, but why should you care? Why does any of this matter? Because this isn't just some dusty academic debate. This shift in thinking completely changes how we see ourselves as humans.
I mean, just look at the difference. The old view says we're basically robots, built by and for our selfish genes. But this new view, it says we're active agents with purpose. The DNA isn't the master, it's a tool, a whole toolkit that the living cell uses. It puts the organism, us, back in the driver's seat.
And the really big takeaway is this. If we're not just puppets of our genes, then that old excuse, oh, my genes made me do it, well, it doesn't really hold water anymore, does it? Suddenly, things like personal responsibility, choice, and our social values become central to being human again. It changes the conversation on everything from law and crime to ethics and morality.
And that's really where this leaves us. Ditching the gene-centric story isn't just about rewriting biology textbooks. It forces us to confront a much, much bigger question. If we aren't just the final product of a genetic program, then what are we?